Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Tuesday, November 9th. This is Africa 54.
A United States envoy returns to Ethiopia to meet with the African Union to help resolve the conflict in the Tigray region. Niger goes into mourning after a school fire kills dozens of children. And African artists turn to the digital world to reap rewards.
The U.S. State Department says Washington believes there is a small window of opportunity to work with the African Union to make progress on peacefully resolving the conflict in Ethiopia. State Department spokesman Ned Price says Jeffrey Feltman, the U.S. Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, met with the African Union's envoy for the region, former President Olusegun Obasanjo of Nigeria, on Monday night to discuss resolving the conflict. The Tigrayan forces and their allies are threatening to march on to the capital. Price reiterated the call for all sides of the conflict to settle their differences diplomatically.
We are, as I said, engaged in concerted diplomacy to urge all parties to end the hostilities immediately. We have called on the Ethiopian government and the TPLF and the OLA to enter into negotiations without preconditions towards a sustainable cessation of hostilities, and for Eritrean forces to withdraw immediately and permanently from Ethiopia. Now, when it comes to Ambassador Feltman's activity in the region, he returned to Ethiopia today from Kenya, and I'll come to that, to continue to urgently press the parties to de-escalate the conflict and negotiate, as I said before, a cessation of hostilities. He continues to raise our concern about the risk of intercommunal violence, and that is a concern that we've raised repeatedly with Ethiopian authorities and regional authorities in recent days. We have seen reports that those with Tigrayan ethnicity are coming under, are being harassed or worse. Of course, those reports are concerning. It is part of the reason why we have called for an immediate cessation of hostilities, knowing that the potential for intercommunal violence remains high. We are deeply concerned about the potential for escalating intercommunal violence. It is why we are engaged with a number of actors, a number of officials in the Ethiopian government, why we have engaged with the TPLF, why we are working at this very concertedly.
War erupted in November 2020 between federal troops and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, the ruling party of Tigray. Since then, thousands of people have been killed in the conflict and more than 2 million have fled their homes. For more on the situation in Ethiopia, I'm joined live from the United Nations by VOA U.N. correspondent Margaret Besheer, who is closely following discussions on Ethiopia. Margaret, first, what is of the utmost concern from the African Union Special Envoy and former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo?
Well, I think, Esther, we heard a lot of the same concerns from now High Representative Obasanjo on the situation in Ethiopia. He also used that term, a window of opportunity. He said that though he was a bit more dire, he said that window is closing and that there is very little time left to find a lasting political solution and avert an escalation of the military conflict. And, you know, he's also been in Ethiopia since Thursday. He's met with the Prime Minister. He's met with leaders in Mekelle. He's today going to Amhara and Afar. So a lot of intensive diplomacy from several angles here, trying to avert this. He said he did have one positive message to the Security Council on Monday. He said that the leaders, both in the north and in Addis, both expressed an understanding that they need political solutions to the crisis, that it is a political conflict at its heart.
Does the United Nations Secretary General have the same concerns as Mr. Obasanjo?
Yes, absolutely. And the UN officials here, from the Secretary General to his political chief to his humanitarian chief, they've all been expressing concern. Rosemary DiCarlo, who's the UN political chief, told the Council yesterday that there is a very real possibility of Ethiopia sliding into a civil war. And it's very concerning for the UN. This is a country of more than 100 million people. Imagine the humanitarian crisis that would bring on if war did reach that level.
What are you learning, Margaret?
And not just
sure.
also in Ethiopia, but the instability would spread throughout the Horn was the other concern.
Margaret, what are you learning about the UN humanitarian chief, Martin Griffiths, who just visited Ethiopia?
So Mr. Griffiths also went to Tigray. He was in Addis. He met with the prime minister. He's trying to sort out the humanitarian crisis. There are more than 5 million people in Tigray who need aid, 2 million more in Amhara and Afar. There's a de facto government blockade on Tigray. Aid hasn't gotten in nearly 4 weeks now. There's no fuel, very little cash, no supplies. The word on the trip was that it was, he put a positive spin on it. His office said he had constructive talks. But as we're coming on the air today, we're learning that several UN staff have been detained by, it looks like, the government. The UN confirms that their security officers have visited the detained staff. We don't know if they're Ethiopian nationals or if they're foreigners. We don't know this detail at the moment. We don't know in what departments they work, if they're humanitarian workers or what precisely. We're trying to find out more details, but the UN has sent a letter to the foreign minister asking for their release, which implies that the UN believes the government is the one who detained them. So I don't know that puts a very positive light on Mr. Griffiths' trip. He just left yesterday, and if they were detained today, that's not a great sign. And you might recall that at the end of September, the government also expelled 7 very senior UN officials from Ethiopia.
And briefly, what did the U.S. ambassador to the UN say at the meeting yesterday?
She had a very strong statement, also calling for a halt to the fighting, for negotiations without preconditions. She said that this is a war of angry men, and it's hurting women and children, and it needs to stop.
Margaret, thank you. VOA UN correspondent Margaret Besheer reporting live from the United Nations. In West Africa, Niger begins 3 days of mourning on Tuesday, honoring at least 25 young children killed when their thatched roof classrooms caught fire in the southern part of the country on Monday, according to the Council of Ministers. Officials say at least 14 others were injured, some seriously, in the blaze in Maradi city. Classes have been suspended for 3 days as authorities try to determine what caused the classrooms made of straw to go up in flames. A similar tragedy occurred in April when a fire fueled by high winds swept through an elementary school on the outskirts of Niger's capital, Niamey, killing 20 children. That fire raised concerns among students and parents over the dangers of temporary classrooms set up outside. Meanwhile, the mining community in Niger is reeling after at least 18 people were killed on Sunday in an artisanal gold mine collapse in southern Niger, according to the local mayor. The disaster occurred in the southern Maradi region near the Niger's border with Nigeria. The death toll is likely to rise, according to the mayor of the commune of Dan Issa, Amadou Guero. The governor of Maradi region, Abubakar Chaibu, visited the site Monday and is promising better working conditions for people at the site.
We are with young people who are looking for work. They are looking to feed themselves. This strike is me as an official for this reason. We are going to analyze how to organize this operation and make sure that the people work with dignity and equality. We'll also look out for their safety.
Artisanal miners often use old-fashioned and unregulated methods of digging, leading to frequent and deadly accidents. Elsewhere in West Africa, the death toll from a fuel tanker explosion in Sierra Leone's capital stands at 115, according to a health ministry spokesperson. Hundreds of people gathered on the outskirts of Freetown at a mass burial of the dead. The victims included people who had flocked to collect fuel leaking from the ruptured tanker, which later exploded following a collision in a Freetown suburb on Friday. Hundreds more were injured in the blast. Medical workers wearing hazmat suits carried flag-draped coffins through a crowd of mourners before lowering them into freshly dug graves. Sierra Leone's Interior Minister David Maurice Panda Noah was among those at the funeral.
Very huge for us, a huge loss of life. As His Excellency said, it is a difficult time for everybody who have relatives. Some people do not even know that their relatives are dead, and some of them, were coming, burying burnt without recognition. You can't recognize them, and so it's a really difficult time. Over 100 people have died. Here we're burying like 76 of these people. Some have been taken by the relatives who recognize them. Some have died in a hospital and have been taken by the relatives. So it's a really, real sad time, and hard and difficult for many, many people, including me.
Freetown's health services have suffered from years of underfunding and drop in medical staffing during the 2014-2016 Ebola epidemic. A Sierra Leonean bar owner, Mohamed Lamin Mansari, says he and his 10 family members are suffering and have not received any help following the tanker explosion, which destroyed his business and home. Emma McCarthy has the story.
Mohamed Lamin Mansare told everyone to run away from his bar in Sierra Leone's capital, Freetown, moments before a fuel tanker exploded after a traffic collision. That blast on Friday killed at least 99 people and injured hundreds more. One of the dead was a staff member at Mansare's bar. The explosion also destroyed the business and Mansare's home, which he had built for himself and his 10 family members. They're now sleeping outside.
From where the incident happened, we not get...
Since the incident, we've not yet received any personal help. Place to sleep, food to eat, nothing like that yet. But we have been registered for relief. Apart from that, we have not received anything.
We'll not get anything right now. And
if you notice, I have a cold because I have to sleep here and guard the remains because thieves are coming around to steal the zinc. You see, it is really hard for me. My family, everybody is displaced. For now, we don't have any help.
For now, we're not going to help.
Victims of the explosion included people who had flocked to collect fuel leaking from the ruptured vehicle. The accident has threatened to overwhelm Freetown's creaking health system, which has been underfunded for years. For Mansare, it's meant the loss of his livelihood.
And I just don't buy a brand new machine.
He says he recently spent thousands of dollars on furniture, a music system and drinks in the run-up to the festive season. That investment and his means of supporting his family now lost in rubble and ash.
That was Emma McCarthy of Reuters reporting. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 during the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, the newly appointed Deputy Executive Secretary of the UN Economic Commission for Africa talks about promoting the member states. But first, Heidi Adams tells us what's on tap for Wednesday's Straight Talk Africa.
Be sure to join me for the next Straight Talk Africa as we look at coup d'etats in Africa. Experts say globally 2021 was a bumper year for coups. From Sudan and Chad, Guinea, Mali and Tunisia, we'll look at the causes and consequences of the latest series of takeovers and attempted coups in African countries. Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Mozambican native, the newly appointed Deputy Executive Secretary of the UN Economic Commission for Africa, is also a geologist. The commission strives to promote the economic and social development of its member states. Africa 54 correspondent Leone spoke to Antonio Pedro about the challenges and opportunities of the extractive industries sector in Africa and other key topics on his agenda.
The structure of the extractive industry in Africa, unfortunately, in most of our jurisdictions, continue the same, meaning we continue to be countries that export raw materials, whilst, of course, the African mining vision, amongst other important goals, had as its main goal promoting linkages between the extractive sector and the national and regional economies. It had value addition and resource-driven industrialization as core objectives. There's still many more things to be done. There are countries that are making progress. I'm very happy with the resource-driven industrialization agenda, for example, in Angola. I think they are progressively promoting value addition on many areas. I mean, the diamonds that are now being cut and polished in Angola. But this needs to happen in many other countries on the continent for us to say that indeed the African mining vision has contributed to changing the paradigm.
You were leading an initiative, actually, to bring top investors to the DRC, looking at how to further develop cobalt, lithium, manganese, and other minerals into battery precursors for the African and global electrical vehicle market. There is an upcoming forum to discuss this and more. How important is this forum?
So we are bringing to DRC investors, captains of industry from within and from without Africa, governments, of course, to explore the rich endowments that DRC and the rest of Africa have with a view to localizing this important value chain. By 2025, the entire value chain is going to be about $8.8 trillion. Of which $7 trillion is on the upper hand, the production of the electric vehicles. So we'll be moving from, let's say, 10 million electric vehicles down to 160 million electric vehicles by 2050. I commissioned a study to Bloomberg Nerf that has demonstrated that DRC can be a globally competitive investment destination for the production of battery precursors, beating both in terms of the cost structure and in terms of the emissions, countries like China, for that matter, as far as emissions are concerned, and the United States, as far as costs are concerned. So with all of those fundamentals, the question that we ask is that why is it that when it is to exploring raw materials, there is a flow of foreign direct investment to DRC, but when it is to invest into value addition, in investing in resource-driven industrialization, then there is quite a lot of hesitation.
At the bottom of the value chain, the people there who work in the mines, they have the short end of the stick. How do we ensure that they have a better stake?
It's going to be a conversation also that interests the ordinary citizen and those that are directly impacted by mining. And one of the roundtables is focused on the so-called ESG factors, environmental, social, and governance factors. How can we utilize instruments like local content and national suppliers development programs as tools to ensure the small and medium enterprises are part of the value chain?
The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa has insisted recently that African governments need help from the richer world, notably the G20, while making their own efforts to address something you have called the double jeopardy of the COVID-19 pandemic on the health and the economic sector on the continent. How far has the call gone, and what more should be done at this point in time?
There is a lot of that's happening. For example, we are helping African countries to reduce their dependence on the importation of pharmaceutical goods. Some countries, are importing in excess of 90% of the pharmaceutical goods from abroad. And COVID-19 has shown how vulnerable they are when they are confronted with, for example, supply-side disruptions. First, Africans to address their own problems, the strong efforts to try and impress upon the rest of the world that it's important to ensure that Africa is able to respond financially to the double jeopardy, because it was not only a disruption of the economic functioning of the continent, and because of that, of course, our revenue streams dwindled, and because of that, our capacity to respond to the health pandemic diminished. So hence the reference to the double jeopardy. And the only way to, of course, address those things is to have the double-pronged sort of interventions, restoring the economic growth, but at the same time ensuring that the pandemic is tamed by having more people vaccinated. So we are very happy that already vaccines are being produced on the continent. We need to see more of that.
That was Africa 54 correspondent Leone speaking with Antonio Pedro, Deputy Executive Secretary of the UN Economic Commission. Non-fungible tokens, a kind of digital ownership, are increasingly being used by artists in Nigeria and across Africa to sell more of their works and at higher prices. Nekachile reports.
In his Lagos studio, artist Abdulrahman Yusuf is making adjustments to his piece, Napoleon No Do Pass This One. He used to sell such pieces online, but in May was introduced to non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, increasing the number of pieces you can sell and at higher prices.
Napoleon, being an emperor and a great warrior, I liken the situation to the fact that Lagos road is like a battlefield and there's always like road rage. So that is what the man on the bike signifies.
NFTs are essentially digital bragging rights, using blockchain to record ownership of an asset. The explosive growth has yet shown no sign of abating, and they're increasingly being used by artists in Nigeria and across Africa.
People didn't look at art like this before in Nigeria. People really do not care about art, but as they've seen how, like in the Western world, how it can be an investment.
The growing influence of NFTs took center stage at the annual Art X Lagos, a 4-day international fair that ended on Sunday. It involved a special NFT sale in partnership with digital marketplace Super Rare, the first such collaboration with an African art fair, according to Art X Lagos founder Tokini Peterson.
They're able to secure their work on the blockchain. They're able to attach smart contracts to their work, which govern the ways in which the works are sold and resold. It brings so much liberty and so much independence for these artists, and really just opens up their options.
Yusuf's Napoleon No Do Pass This One, meaning Napoleon did not do more than this, was unsure. He sold one piece at Art X Lagos, but did not reveal the price. His most expensive NFT work before the event sold for 2.2 Ethereum, or over $10,000 US. For him and other artists, he says NFTs are a life-changing opportunity.
Nekachile of Reuters filed that report. Due to low COVID-19 infection rates, South Africa has reopened music events across the country, much to the delight of audiences and artists. Zahia Kasim joins music fans in Johannesburg as live performances become normal again.
The Johannesburg Philharmonic Orchestra is back after a 2-year pause. For the musicians, the opportunity to entertain live audiences is a relief from the pressures brought about by the deadly coronavirus. For chief flautist Kanyisile Matwetwa, sitting at the back of the stage is unfamiliar territory for one of the country's top musicians. Pre-COVID, she would be perched next to the conductor, but today she is surrounded by plastic shields with a healthy distance between herself and the next instrumentalist. It's one of many sacrifices she has had to make to perform on stage again.
I think in May, that's when it kind of really hit me that there's nothing there's no performance, there's no way out of this. We're not going to get out of this for another year, maybe 2 years, maybe 5 years. This is like here to stay. And I'm in an industry, and especially I play the flute, an instrument which at the time people were like, the flute is so dangerous, it spreads air everywhere. It was like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to play again?
The Soweto-born musician is the youngest of 7 children. At 14, she witnessed a musical performance which inspired her to pick up the flute. 2 decades later, a music teacher and mother of 2, Mthethwa says she has traveled the world, studied abroad, and owes everything to her passion for music. During the lockdown, she lost all stage work and had to take her children out of school. It was a difficult time, but she continued to train budding musicians through digital platforms and continued to play music with other artists through online concerts.
Unfortunately, when you're playing for speakers to do a YouTube video or something, that release isn't quite there because there's no one there to get the energy. Just seeing people afterwards, there was this one guy in the front row after we finished playing who had like tears running down his face, and he was like this, like he was in church, you know? So you realize that concerts and music is church for some people.
Musicians like Mthethwa were kept afloat by a $20 million fund created by the government to help artists get through the lockdown. The chief executive of the opera, Bongani Tembe, says these grants managed to keep the orchestra going.
Our own resources plus the income earned through these videos. For the first year, musicians earned roughly about 70 to 80% of their normal, what they would have earned normally.
It's not just the local artists who are glad to be back on stage. One of the highlights of this year's performances is the lineup of international talent, like German conductor Justice France, who was excited to be traveling and learning from his African counterparts.
To see all these wonderful musicians and see that their heart really is burning, that is a big inspiration also for me, and my heart also is burning.
The show was a success, but more importantly, artists like Mthethwa are doing what they were born to do: perform in a room filled with adoring fans. Zahir Qasim for VOA News, Johannesburg.
Nice. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.